Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Dr. Brenna Squires, a psychologist, educator, and couples fertility coach. She helps couples who are trying to conceive to strengthen their marriage, drawing on her decade-long relationship with her husband and 7-year personal struggle with infertility. Dr. Brenna brings empathy to her work and partners with clients, offering a special connection to those facing fertility challenges and helping them create a strong foundation for the family they are building. And in today's episode, we'll be discussing how to build supportive relationships in the fertility season and beyond, including communication, mindset, and boundaries. So welcome, Dr. Brenna. I'm very excited for our conversation today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yeah, so a 7-year fertility journey, that is quite a long time, right? That is closer to a decade than not. So I'm
Yes.
really curious to hear a little bit about your backstory and looking back, obviously
Mhm.
hindsight is 2020, but what are a few things that you feel helped you and your partner the most?
During this time, the one of the biggest things I will say that helped us the most was our communication. We thought early on, we thought we were communicating, but we really weren't. We were just talking. And it wasn't until about 4 years into our marriage, and at that point, it was 2 years into trying to conceive, we realized that we weren't really working together as a team. We were doing our own thing. We had a lot of stress at our job, we had a lot of stress with family. And we were just talking about the weather, the day to day stuff, and not really about what's going on deep inside. And so we realized we really need to start communicating better about our fears, our frustrations, our sadness, our discouragement, and our hopes. And we really needed to start working together as a team to work on this shared goal together. And
Mhm.
so that's one of the big things, the communication part, and then that kind of went into teamwork, being a better team and working together as a team to get this shared goal, which is having a baby, and then also building that foundation for our future family. And then again, putting in those proper boundaries. We didn't have good boundaries, which is funny enough to say as a psychologist that I didn't have great boundaries all around. I mean, during that time, my mother-in-law moved in with us for a season, which looking back, you think, why would you do that? But there were just circumstances going on that you think, okay, well, it's not going to be that long. And what was supposed to be 1 month turned into two, turned into three, turned into seven, added a lot of stress. And so we realized we need to add better boundaries. And so adding better boundaries at work and with our relationships really helped. So those would be the top three things I would say that we've really worked on, was the communication, the teamwork, and the boundaries.
Absolutely. Communication is so important. And like you said, you guys weren't communicating, but you didn't necessarily realize it. You didn't have that
No.
awareness because maybe we weren't necessarily reflected how to properly communicate when we were growing up with our parents or whoever it may be in our life. You had this light bulb moment. You realized we need to be communicating better.
Yeah.
How did you figure that out? Is that something that you figured out for yourself? I mean, obviously, you have your background. Did you
Yeah.
work with someone, or what did that look like?
So we realized we weren't communicating about certain things when we finally had that moment of 4 years into our marriage, we had that moment where we had to sit down and talk about what was going on because there was a lot of stress and tension in our relationship at that point, and we decided to just lay it all out there. And when we laid it all out there and started sharing our fears and frustrations and took away all of the barriers, we realized we both had our own assumptions about what the other person was going through, what we were going through, what we thought was happening. We had these expectations that we thought were happening. And we realized that we had a lot of dysfunctional ideas or maladaptive thoughts, how you say it in that realm. We had all of these ideas of what should be happening. And they were not happening. And we realized as we started talking that we weren't actually talking about what mattered. We were just talking about the basics of, okay, well, when is it time? When is it ovulation time? And when is the next time we need to take this test? And when is the next time we need to take that test? So we realized that it's our conversations were more like checklists and more like regular check-ins as opposed to deep emotional check-ins. And so for example, I remember a time where it would just be like just another day and I had all of these emotions and he didn't really know what to do until we started talking about why I was having all of those emotions. And we had the conversation related to, on cycle day one and even the day before, when you get your period and when you know you're getting your period, all of these hormones start fluctuating in my body. They start rushing in my body and they start making me feel off.
Mhm.
And then they start triggering all of these negative thoughts. And they also start triggering a lot of emotions of sadness because now my period is here. And there's a lot of frustration and sadness and confusion as to what's going on. And early on, I wasn't sharing all of that with him. I just seemed moody and I just seemed frustrated. But when I started to open up and tell him, this is what I'm feeling on those moments. Every time my period comes, this is what I'm feeling inside my body, hormonally, mentally, this is what I'm feeling. And when I started sharing all of that, it really added more context for him and it made him want to show more empathy towards me. And so by me opening up, sharing what was going on, he then wanted to show more empathy towards me. And then he started saying, how can I help you? And so we noticed that once we went from talking to communicating to really deep connecting through our communication, it allowed us to be able to connect at a deeper level and really strengthen that relationship.
Hmm. That's really beautiful. And I love the two words you said in the beginning, assumptions and
Hmm.
expectations. Like,
Yes,
I feel like those are just huge. And it happens, right? We
it does.
just naturally assume what the other person may be thinking or feeling. And then, of course, I feel like mostly it's on the woman's part where we have these expectations for the male partner or the partner
Yeah,
to show up in. And
yeah,
maybe if that communication isn't really there to solidify those expectations, then that can be difficult. And
yeah,
I love that once you really, like you said, gave him context and explained, well, during this phase of my cycle,
yeah,
right? This is like one of the lower points of my hormones. I'm just not feeling the best. And of course, you add
yes,
on getting your period, it has a whole nother meaning when you're trying to conceive.
yes.
And I think having that educational component is super
Hmm.
important. And it's funny because my husband now, sometimes I feel like he knows my cycle better than I do.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So it's really good to get them involved and then maybe share with
Yeah,
your partner these are the things that could be really beneficial for me, at
yeah,
least in the luteal phase, in that menstrual phase. Like
yes.
maybe you cook dinner more or draw me a bath or whatever it could be, so then they can support you.
Yes, and I really think knowing what you sometimes it helps to know what you want and then
Yes.
to explicitly say during these times, this is what will help me. And I recommend couples saying this when you're calm and when you're in your best moments, because there are times in the middle of your cycle when you're going through this where your answer is, I don't know what I want. Because again, all of the hormones going through and all of the emotions that you're going through really just make you feel discouraged and held down. And so in those moments, you're thinking, I don't know what I want. But if you have previously shared in the past things that make you feel better, so one thing that makes me feel better that I've shared with my husband is if I'm feeling down, something that helps me is to either get me a snack or just to rub my back. That really helps. And so if I have those moments where I will say, I don't really know what's going on, he'll hand me a snack and rub my back and just listen to me and say, okay, what else can we do right now? Or sometimes he'll just sit there and we'll sit in that moment of comfort, but he would not have known to do that had
Hmm.
I not told him. And that what goes back to that expectations. I can't assume that he knows, hey, I want a snack or hey, I want a back rub. But if I've previously told them, that's when he can just kick into autopilot and say, well, I already know and she wants this when she's feeling overwhelmed because she's
Hmm.
told me.
If you're a man or woman and you don't really know
Okay.
what it is you want when you're feeling frustrated or
Yes.
down or anything, how would you recommend that they figure out and learn what it is that feels supportive to them?
Good question. Yes. So, what I recommend in those situations is trial and error, starting with some things that are small, such as the basics, a snack, maybe a foot rub, or let's say if they're cold, maybe offering for a sweater or a cozy blanket, or maybe a warm beverage like tea or hot chocolate, something like that, and offering those things and keeping the communication open saying that I thought you might like this. Please let me know if this is something that you enjoy. So as you're offering that thing of comfort, give them something or what do you think it might be and then tell them that you would like some feedback. And the person receiving it, if you like it, let them know. Oh, yes, I really enjoy that hot chocolate that you gave me, or I really enjoyed that blanket that you gave me. If you did not enjoy it, that is excellent information too. I don't really enjoy getting hot tea when I'm feeling overwhelmed. What I like is a nice cold iced tea. That is excellent feedback. And so the next time you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe they'll try iced tea and say, okay, last time you said you wanted iced tea. Let me know if you like this now. And then they can say, yes, this is perfect. I would love this next time. And so just that trial and error of trying something small
Hmm.
and then getting that feedback.
Hmm. Love that. So just exploring trial and error and then that like open line of communication, open-ended questions. Beautiful.
Yeah. The easiest things, like I said, I can think of that are quick and simple are a snack, mostly a warm beverage, or if the person likes cold beverages, snack, something cuddly, and then go from there.
Hmm. Perfect. In your experience, I'm just curious if you have seen different ways where the male partner likes to be supported or a
Yes.
way for, I guess, to maybe help open him up. Because in my experience, I feel like sometimes the male partners are a little bit more hesitant to be
Yeah.
open and vulnerable and to share. I've had
Yeah.
some that have been amazingly open and
Yeah.
willing to partake in that area, but I think it can be a sticky area for some. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and so there's many different reasons why man doesn't want to open up during that time. It might be because he doesn't want to overwhelm his wife any more than she already is. Maybe he feels like he needs to be the strong one. Maybe he feels like he doesn't know what to say or do. Or, I mean, there's numerous reasons why. But one of the best things that I recommend during that time is to, one, create a safe space and specifically state that. I remember when I first had this conversation with my husband, we had that conversation, and then I remember I explicitly told him, I want to create a safe place for you where you can feel like you can share with me what's going on. I know there are times where it seems like I might not be able to handle it, but in times where I can, I want to be able to be there for you. And right now, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling strong, and I want to be that support system for you. What can I do to make this space a safe place for you? And I just start off in that open manner. And that is the way that I like to recommend to my clients being honest, because there are times where I'm not the best person to be the strong one. So cycle day one is not the time to talk to me about your frustrations because I'm already feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's sometime in ovulation phase or in luteal phase that I am more apt to having that safe place for you. I mean, I want to be able to have that safe place at all times. And I do recommend that for couples, but realistically, if I am being overly emotional, I don't know what it's going to be like. And so just allowing couples to know, recognize where you're strong at and where you're best able to support him, and then tell him you want to create a safe space for him. How can I help you? And then just listen. And so some of the feedback I remember my husband shared with me is just that, being honest and then listening. Doesn't always want feedback. He just wants to have somebody to listen, and knowing that you're in a space where I don't have to be the support system. And that's when he told me, knowing when you're strong and that you can handle what I'm going to say was really helpful as well. And so those are some things, some tips that I share with couples of how you can help support your spouse during that time.
Yeah, and it really ties back to the educational piece of the highs and the lows that I go through in my cycle. So again, another really important going back to high school when we had like our health education class, but maybe we
Yeah.
didn't learn very much or we just don't remember because that was so long ago. So being able to tie that in of
Mhm.
this time in my phase,
Yeah.
in my cycle is when I could receive what it is you have to share. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just having that understanding.
Yeah, it's important to know when, again, knowing what's going on in your body and knowing, being self-attuned to what's going on and knowing when you're able to be that strong support for the other person, and also knowing when it's not that time, when you're not as strong and you need to be able to receive, to be able to be a good receiver as well. I also noticed some couples struggle with that, being that good receiver of
Mhm.
the support. So being able to recognize when you're in that place and being able to receive or give when it's your turn to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'd love to go back to boundaries. So
Yes.
you guys had your mother-in-law come stay with you, which I'm sure that was out of the goodness of your heart, whatever the situation may have been. But like you said, sometimes things go on longer than expected, and that's just one of many examples
Yes.
where we should be setting up boundaries. So I
Yes.
know for me, one thing that I like to just remind my clients about is you don't have to say yes to everything, right? Filling your schedule up to the
Yes.
brim. Maybe you're wanting to hang out with your friends and then also hanging out with his friends and then also doing family things. Where are those pockets of time for you to have together time or maybe even
Yeah.
alone time? And that's just another example of boundaries, but I
Yeah.
would love to hear your take and
Yeah.
recommendations when it comes to setting healthy boundaries
Yes.
for both partners, because obviously one partner may need different boundaries than the other.
Yeah. So the way I like to describe boundaries is that at any point in time, you can put a boundary, even if you felt like you've already started something and you don't know if you can take it back. I like to visualize it like a slide. Like when you were younger, you would go down a slide and sometimes you would say, I don't want to go anymore. And you would put your hands up on the side and your feet up on the side and you would stop in the middle of the slide. And sometimes you would choose to go down the slide, and sometimes you would turn around and walk back up the slide. And you could go down the slide, or sometimes people would jump off the slide or go back down the stairs. But I like that visualization to say, at any point in time, you can stop. And and with that, if you don't put a boundary, I share that example because if you don't put a boundary and then you realize this was a bad idea, what do we do to get out of this? And so my husband was actually working rotating shifts during this time while we were trying to conceive. And if you don't know what rotating shifts are, sometimes he would work morning shifts. So he would go to work at 7 a.m. Sometimes he would work afternoon shifts. He would start work at 2 p.m. And sometimes it was a night shift where he would start work at 6 p.m., which is really difficult if you're trying to time ovulation and you're trying to time that perfect timing of the once a month. It
Yeah.
was really challenging for us. And we realized that was really not good for our goal. And so we needed to figure out how to put a boundary with that. And after much discussion, we realized this job was not going to work anymore. And so, much like the slide, he had to put his hands up and say, this isn't going to work. And so, he actually went into his job and gave his 2 week notice and said, this isn't going to work for me anymore. And he had full intention of going back up the slide and going down the steps to say, I'm done. And his boss said, because he told his boss that it's impacting my marriage and we really want to prioritize our marriage as we're trying to build a family. And his boss was so understanding. He said, I want to come alongside you and support you on your marriage, that I'm going to let you stay in day shift.
Wow.
And he said, I don't want your 2 weeks notice. I'm going to put you on day shift. And he
Mm-hmm.
completely changed the whole dynamic of that because now we're on the same schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because he was willing to stop where he was at and to say, we can't do this anymore, it actually led us to like a completely different side path to say, there's another door on the other side that we didn't realize was there. But what it took was putting those boundaries, having that conversation to say, I want to stop here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a beautiful example. And I know that making a decision like that can be scary because did he have another job lined up or he was gonna just cross that bridge when he got to it?
He didn't have another job lined up, but at that point, we had been married for 4 years and we had been trying to conceive for two, and we had so much stress. And
Yeah.
we had a deep conversation, and we realized we wanted to prioritize our marriage above anything else because up until that point, we had prioritized our job, we had prioritized trying to build our nest egg, we had prioritized family and other things that we realized we weren't doing a good job prioritizing our marriage. And so that was our way of saying, if that happens and we got to go figure out something else. We did have an emergency fund because we were building up our nest egg. And so we had an emergency fund, but we said we need to start working on our marriage. Otherwise, there's not going to be something to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And that big boundary, it is hard and it's scary, but it really lets you know you have to know what you want more.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want more? And at that point, we wanted our marriage more.
Yeah. So prioritizing
Yes.
is really maybe that push and that motivation that you need to be able to
Yes.
make such a big decision. And like you said, you had no idea that that other door, that other option was
Yeah.
even available to you. So that's really amazing that his boss was so supportive. But I have had clients also decide this job is just stressing me out.
Mm.
It's not supportive of
Yeah.
building a family and
Correct.
being able to even take care of myself the way I want to and decide to change.
Yeah.
And for some cases, after they made that decision, they actually conceived pretty shortly after doing that. So I think that
That's
that's
stress.
a beautiful viewpoint of really prioritizing what you want and then setting boundaries to support your goals and your priorities.
Yes, I actually think they go hand in hand. Once you can
Mhm.
set a priority, I think it's much easier to put those boundaries. It's much easier
Mhm.
to say no when you realize I have something more important that I want. I want this more than I fear your rejection, or than I fear not having that income, then I fear not having that. I want this more. And so I really feel like the key to boundaries is having a priority and what do you want more?
Mhm. Beautiful advice. I love that. So, when you have clients come to you, a couple, they're struggling to get pregnant,
Mhm.
what are maybe your top three, maybe up to five if you have a lot, just tips or starting places that you have
Yeah.
them work on?
Yes, so I can go down the list. I really have 8 key things that I like to work on with couples, and I'll go down the list of a couple of them. Again, communication is a big one. Communicating about as many things as you possibly can, and let the other person tell you when you're communicating too much. You don't know what's
Mm.
too much until the other person says that's too much. And when I say communicating about everything, that's not saying you need to speak 1,000 words a minute and speak everything in 1 hour. It just means over time, if you're having a fear, share it. If you're having a thought, share it. If you're having a concern, share it. And so making sure that you're doing the journey together, getting on the same game plan. Do you both want to have kids in the same manner? I know I've talked to some people who one will want IVF and the other one will not. And they
Mhm.
don't really discuss why. And sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's fear of all that is entailed. And so really making sure you're on the same game plan and creating a good game plan with one another, working on teamwork. Something that's good with teamwork too is that if you have the same game plan and you're working together as a team, if something comes up and you don't know what to do, I remember one time when I was in the doctor's office with my husband, he came with me to an appointment and the doctor said something to me and I got overwhelmed with emotion. I couldn't answer his questions anymore. And my husband just kicked in and just started answering the questions because he knew the plan. He knew what I was feeling because I had already told him about it. And so he knew everything that was going on. So he was able to just kick in and complete the rest of the appointment without any hiccups. And so
Mhm.
being on the same page and being good teamwork really helps with that. Boundaries with friends and family, getting a good support system, adding fun, adding
Mhm.
fun and joy back into the relationship and making it about you and not just about baby. I know that can be sometimes people will say, "Well, how do you do that?" One fun tip I like to share with couples is have a day, and if you can't do a day, then maybe have a couple of hours where it's only about you guys. Maybe take a dance class or go on a mini trip or do something where there's zero baby talk. I mean, you could talk about something, but it's not about ovulation or cervical mucus or anything like that. It's just about what do you want to do in 10 years? What's your favorite place to go to? Why do you want to go there? Things like that, and just to add the joy back into the relationship. And then also integrating faith. Faith is a really big one for many people. And what do you believe in? And why do you believe in it? And have that conversation. I'm not sure how many I just listed. I don't want to bombard everybody with tips, but what do you believe in and how is that impacting your thought process during this journey?
Mhm. Yes,
Really
lovely.
communicate that with your spouse.
Yeah. So is that part of your free offer for the listeners? 8 powerful ways
Yes.
to strengthen your marriage
Yes.
while you're trying to conceive. So, yes, so if you missed any, no worries. You guys will be able to get Dr. Brenna's freebie in the show notes. So, those 8 ways that she just summarized, and I'm sure it'll be more detailed and you'll be able to
Yes.
get so much from that. So, that is really, really helpful.
I also give more strategies on what to do for each of those 8 to get to jumpstart you right now that you can make changes now.
Hmm. Beautiful.
Yes.
So, let's see. I'm feeling like the way I want to end this is, do you have any couple success story that sticks out in your mind? Like maybe when they came to you, things were just not good. Maybe it was in shambles. Like you said, one wants to do IVF, the other one doesn't want to. Like that's a really big disconnect when
Yeah.
you want the same thing, but you don't want to get there in the same way. So, is there any story or client success that kind of pops into your mind?
The one success that just pops into my mind, it's just brief, but when other people can see it.
Mm-hmm.
When other people can see the changes that you're making. So with this couple, they were having difficulty with communicating and boundaries. And so that's something that they were working on, was communicating and boundaries. But the cool thing about working on communication and boundaries was it didn't just improve their relationship, because they were able to grow together as a couple. They were able to make harder decisions. They actually ended up moving into a new house. And when they moved into a new house, they were able to make decisions together. They were also able to improve their overall health on that journey. And then they shared with me, or actually the wife shared with me, that her coworkers started seeing this, because she wasn't just having boundaries at home with family and friends, but she was having better boundaries at work. And she said, "It's great because my coworkers said, I noticed you're communicating a little bit differently and you have such great boundaries at work. What are you doing differently?" And then she was able to share the tips and strategies with them to better improve their relationships and their boundaries and their communication. And she said they all started showing improvements as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I love about working with couples is that you're not just impacting one person. You're not just impacting two people. You're impacting everybody that they interact with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just that trickle effect. And so that's what gets me so excited about working with the couples, because I get to see firsthand the strength in their relationship and that growth over time, and the joy that now when they talk about each other and they talk to each other, I get to see the sparkle in their eyes and the smile rather than the frustration. And then I also get to hear the success stories about how that overflows into other areas of their life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. What amazing validation on their part for
Hmm.
doing the work, and then
Yes.
also for you as well, just to be able to soak in the growth and everything that they have had from working with you. So I love that.
Yeah.
This conversation has been so inspiring and just a lot of things to think about, not only like I mentioned in the beginning, to build the foundation for your family,
Yes.
your growing family, but to strengthen your marriage, which
Yes.
is why you want to have children in the first place, because you fell
Yes.
in love and you decided to marry each other and be with each other. Your work is so important, and I'm sure you have just saved so many couples from maybe deciding that they can't make it work out for whatever reason,
Yeah.
because the stress of fertility struggles can be a lot. It can be so
Hmm.
much. And when we don't
Yeah.
know how to deal with that, it can unfortunately have a negative impact on marriages. So
Yes.
this work is so important. And please share with the listeners where they can find you, learn
Yes.
more, and connect with you.
Yes, and everything you said is absolutely 100% true. The stress of fertility, it's already stressful and already difficult, and we can use this time to bring us closer together so that we can build that beautiful family that we wanted to build in the first place, rather than allowing it to separate us. And so that's why I love working with these couples. And so you can find me at encourageandempowerwellness.com. You can also reach out to me if you want to connect at Dr. Brenna Squires on Instagram, or if professionally, if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm also there as well, Dr. Brenna Squires.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.